Hey everybody. Um, so, Welcome to lecture number 4. Um, this means, excitingly, that we are more than halfway through our extremely fast course, moving into the last, the last half. So, congrats, you guys. And if you got your draft in for your essay 2, your commercial analysis essay, then you are in really good shape. And you've got one big essay left to write, and then you are all done. So awesome. I come to you today from a little town outside of Paris, having flown here this morning from Bologna. We were in Italy for last week. So, yeah, that's where I am. Um, the stupid program I used to use called WebEx that let me record me and the screen is still not working, unbelievably. So we are stuck yet again with just the screen. C'est la vie, right? Okay. So I wanted to start by going back and talking a little bit about a few things from SA2 that I saw having read everybody's draft now. Um, and actually, before I do that, let me just sort of clarify a couple of little tiny things that some of you have been worried about that you really shouldn't be worried about at all. So one is that on Blackboard, everything is always due at the end of the day. Sometimes I forget to specify a time, and if I do, Blackboard will set the due date time to whatever time I post the assignment. So if you ever see any assignments that are due at really random times, 2:22 p.m. or whatever, that is what has happened. And don't worry, I really don't care. Just disregard, totally disregard. I'm not trying to mess you up. The other thing I wanted to mention is that if I ever mess up your grade in Blackboard, there's a typo when I input it, or Blackboard's not working for you on something and you email me and I forget to input the grade into the Blackboard gradebook, just let me know. I promise I'm not trying to screw you over. I occasionally forget or get confused or something, so it's all good. Just let me know. All right. Cool. So, a couple of little things about SA2. So, one thing I'm going to ask everybody to work on in the revision process is your title. I didn't make comments on titles for anybody because I knew I was going to talk to you all about this as a group. So, just everybody consider that your title needs work. So, in SA3, we're going to start working on research. And you're going to start seeing immediately how important titles are to whether or not you decide to read an essay or an article. So that means we need to work on our own titles. So for these kinds of academic essays that we are writing, there's one convention about titles that can be really helpful. This isn't a requirement, but it's a very useful strategy that I want you guys to know about, and it is to use a colon. Because basically there's two things a title needs to do. It needs to be interesting and it needs to be informative, right? So if you use a colon, that's a really useful structure for getting both of those components in. Either interesting, informative, or informative, interesting. And you can totally get both of those parts in without the colon, but the colon is cool. It's good, it's useful, so I want you guys to try it. So here are two examples from people's papers, people's essay 2 in past semesters. Beer shaming, how cultural reinforcement fails in a recent Budweiser commercial, right? So the beer shaming is clearly the interesting part, and the rest is informative. But beer shaming, that sounds great. It sounds pretty interesting, right? So, but then we still get enough information in there so that the reader can tell whether or not he or she wants to look at the essay in more detail. Or the second example here, race, gender, and family values, cultural reinforcement and controversy in a recent Cheerios commercial. Same principles, a bit more serious, but still interesting. And what both of these titles do is that they give us, they're trying to engage us in wanting to read the whole essay, and they do that, sometimes through something clever like beer shaming, but regardless of whether or not there's some kind of like clever pun or something in the title, they give us a clear sense of what the paper is about, and that's really important. You're going to see that immediately when you start doing your research for essay 3. The cleverest title in the world is no good if it doesn't give the reader a good sense of what the essay is about. Okay, cool. So everybody, one and all, I want to see a new, improved title in your revision. Okay. One other thing I wanted to mention about essay 2 is the eternal question of whether or not to use I in your essay. Okay. So this is one of those things that's actually really discipline specific. So in the humanities, in courses in English or philosophy or history, it's much more acceptable than it is in the sciences or the social sciences. But at the same time, so like, you know, for an English paper, you can use I. It's totally not the end of the world. But you've got to kind of be careful about why you're using it, right? You want to use it only if you need it and if it's relevant. You don't want to use it if you are kind of turning your analytical essay into kind of a story about how, you know, a story about how you started looking for a commercial and then you were thinking about which commercial might be the most useful for comparing to schools, and so then I did this and then I did that, because that turns the paper into a little story about you, and the paper's not a story about you, right? I mean, we don't need to pretend that you didn't write the paper, right? But that you are not the focus of this paper, right? We are, in academic writing, we're always trying to be objective, and that means that this paper is not about, it's not about you, right? So a couple of you were kind of moving too far in the direction of using I really a lot. So, you know, in terms of being objective, right, your sources of evidence are your commercial and schools, and you are proving everything that you claim in these essays using those sources, right? So an analytical essay analyzes evidence, right? And that's very different from either providing opinions or discussing your beliefs, right? Opinions are things like, I like pizza. My favorite color is purple. You can just say that, and we don't expect you to like produce receipts as evidence, right? We'll just believe you because that's your opinion. And it doesn't really, you know, we'll take it at face value and that's fine. It doesn't tell us anything more important about purple or pizza, right? The fact that you happen to like it. Analytical essays do not work on that level at all, right? You have evidence. Yes, it's about what you think, but you have to have evidence for what you think, right? Analytical essays are also not about beliefs, right? Where beliefs can be things like having faith in God, right? The very concept of faith is that it doesn't need to be proven to you like science, right? Analytical essays are more like science than they are like faith, right? In that you have to provide evidence for what you're arguing, and all of this is to get back to that idea that you are not at the center of this essay. Okay, so hold back on using I unless you feel like it's important. Okay, so I want to look at a couple of examples of some paragraphs. I gave pretty much everybody comments about paragraph structure. Not because y'all were doing anything wrong, but just because that's how the process works, right? You know how it is when you're writing a draft. You're trying to get it all out there. You're trying to come up with a thesis. You're trying to prove it. You're trying to make sure everything makes sense. And now, at this stage, the revision stage, we go back in, calm down, and try to think self-consciously about things we couldn't really concentrate on at the time we were just trying to get everything out, right? So that's when we go back and look at the structure of particular paragraphs. When I am writing, this is definitely something I cannot think about when I'm drafting. It's something I do in revision. So here is what I would consider to be a pretty well-structured paragraph. So let's look at it. This commercial's central value is self-improvement. So that's our bun. The boy loves his dog, but we also repeatedly see him teaching his puppy to grow up with obeying his command. It does not matter if their day consisted of failed attempts of teaching the dog something new, something which is something we see in the commercial. At the end of the day, they love each other and they are working toward a common goal. Both dog and boy are striving to learn and to be better, a goal that reaches far beyond just loving one's pet. Self-improvement is this commercial's version of the Budweiser commercials. Oh, jeez, excuse me. A little bit of a realism there. Okay, self-improvement is this commercial's version of the Budweiser commercial's American Dream, in which the underdog triumphs. Okay, so what I want you to notice about this commercial, and feel free to pause here so you can read the paragraph more carefully on your own, but it starts with a bun, right? And it's a bun that contains the whole paragraph, right? Everything in the paragraph is about the bun, right? So it contains the burger, right? And then note note what happens in the middle of the paragraph, right? The paragraph proves the idea that this commercial is about self-improvement by looking at specifics from the commercial, okay? Okay, so here's one that needs work. Another key element in Scholes' theory was cultural reinforcement. The reason why I chose this commercial is because it connects to the American values and beliefs of many blue-collar, hardworking Americans. It shows a troubled area but motivated people to get out and rebuild it. The commercial's intended message also calls for people to go forth and work in general. This can be attributed to many Americans who belong to the working class. It puts together images of these American rituals to create an effective narrative. The commercial intends to link the viewer's patriotism and good values. So this paragraph has some problems. The first one that I see is the bun. Notice that the bun does not really match up with the rest of the paragraph. With that bun, I expect this paragraph to be about cultural reinforcement in Scholes' theory, right? And that's not what this paragraph is about. This paragraph is about the idea that this commercial reinforces a value having to do with work. So there's a mismatch between the bun and the burger. And I tried really hard on Google image search today to try to find an image to describe that. And I'm Googling like burger, bun slipping off a burger, yada, yada. Couldn't do it. Anyway, you see what I'm talking about. And the other thing is that this paragraph is also not looking at specifics from the commercial. Okay, so here's an improved version of this paragraph, which involves actually splitting it into two. So you might take that first sentence about cultural reinforcement and actually write a whole paragraph explaining that idea using Scholes' ideas and examples. That's what I would do. And then break into a new paragraph that's about cultural reinforcement. So I'm going to pick it up with a new paragraph. This commercial reinforces a particular American value pertaining to blue-collar work. It focuses on a geographic region that is troubled because union jobs were outsourced. Yet the commercial insists that there is a population of particularly motivated people who are working to rebuild their region. With a series of vignettes portraying blue-collar workers, the commercial calls for people to go forth and work in general. It is these blue-collar workers who have the drive to work hard enough to take on the huge task of rebuilding the region. That rebuilding will depend, the commercial suggests in one moment, on the work ethic of people who pave roads, for instance. It is blue-collar work, not computer programming or banking, that emerges as a value that can save a nation. So notice that this whole paragraph is contained by its bun. And then notice that it really digs into the idea of that this commercial is about work, and it explains how. It explains what work means in this commercial. And it goes deeply into that idea. It's really tempting to just kind of like say it's about work and then move on, right? But this paper is going to need a whole paragraph about that, and talking about specific moments from the commercial that allow this writer to think about, for example, like what counts as work in this commercial, like what specific kind of work. So, principles. Start with the bun, an analytical point, not just a topic. The bun needs to hold the burger together, right? So if your bun is entirely about Scholes, then the paragraph needs to be about Scholes, right? Let your bun hold your burger together. And then finally, get evidence and analysis into every paragraph. Okay, I'm going to post this to YouTube, and I'll